Hello! From Alaska welcomes you back to Hoof and Woof Sled Dogs near Healy, Alaska. Today we're going to take you down to Anchorage for the ceremonial start of Iditarod 2005. And we're also going to give you a tour of what is it that those people have inside those sled bags anyway. Here in Healy, even though we're not running Iditarod this year, we're continuing to train the dogs in the beautiful March, Alaska weather. March in Alaska brings us beautiful long 12-hour days, warm days, cool nights, and beautiful displays of the northern lights after the sun goes down. As the teams you're about to see embark on their journey to Nome, we at Hoof and Woof are preparing for some smaller 200-mile races near Fairbanks, and we're training our young dogs so that they will be ready to race in the Great Race in a few years. So here we are in Anchorage for the start of the race. Aaron Burmeister leaves the start chute. Five-time champion Rick Swenson heads to Nome. Ramey Brooks, hopeful Iditarod winner. The big names are joined by rookies like Debbie Moterow and other competitive but less well-known teams like that of Zach Steer, yet last year's second-placed Quest winner. On races like Iditarod, and even in training runs like this, racers carry in their sled bag things known as mandatory gear, and also other things to help them care for the dogs when they're traveling the trail. One of the first pieces of mandatory equipment is a proper cold weather sleeping bag. This is something that some mushers actually never even take out of their sled on Iditarod because they just sleep on top of their sled or in the straw next to their dogs. But many mushers do use the sleeping bag. The second item of mandatory gear is a 3-gallon capacity cooker, which is used to melt snow to make water to help feed the dogs. We'll show you how this works in a minute. Mushers must carry a snow hook. This here is an extra snow hook, which many people carry inside the sled to help tie out the leaders when we're stopped at checkpoints and keep the line straight. We must carry an axe on the trail in case of downed trees that we need to clear the trail. Mushers on Iditarod are required to have 2 sets of booties for each leg of the race. One set of booties can actually be on the dog's feet, and then more need to be in the sled. Most people package their booties in a manner such as this. This particular package contains 8 sets of booties. Some mushers use gang lines that have cable in the center. If not, we're required to carry cable drop lines to tie out the dogs. And then snowshoes round out the mandatory gear. These are not used very often today with the well-broken trail, but in the past they were used on rough stretches of trail when deep snow made it difficult for the dogs to pass. It is also required that mushers carry enough food to feed the dogs at least one time, and some races require them to carry food for themselves as well. In addition to food, it's very important for the musher to carry water so that they can stay hydrated along the trail. Some races also have mandatory gear such as the number bib that mushers must wear, and most of the time there's a small notebook called a vet book where vets can keep track of the general health of each dog. There's also an assortment of other things that mushers carry along the trail to help them care for their dogs. This is a bag of dog coats, which are basically windbreakers for the dogs in areas where it's very cold, and especially cold and windy. It helps them to stay warm. Mushers also carry a first aid kit on the trail to help them care for their dogs. It may contain things like ace wraps, gauze to bandage any injuries. This is a skin stapler in case a dog gets cut and you needed to close the wound. Most mushers carry several kinds of ointments or powders to help treat injuries or sore feet on their dogs. This bag contains an antibiotic powder that we put on feet, a tube of foot ointment, and a container of something called Algavel, which we put on sore shoulders or sore wrists. When dogs have sore wrists, we might put Algavel on them and then put something called a wrist wrap around the dog's wrist. And this puts some compression on the dogs and helps a swollen wrist to feel better. In addition to things to care for the dogs, we also carry a kit of materials to help repair the sled in case the sled should break. We have rope to tie things, some material to patch holes in the sled bag, the rope that is used to lash the sled together, a piece of webbing that can be used to repair harnesses that might be chewed or broken somehow. Every year on Iditarod there's at least one story about somebody who severely breaks their sled coming down the gorge or the steps. This is a hose clamp, and it's one of the most commonly used things to repair sleds. You put that around what's broken and cinch it down tight to hold it together. And another one of the most commonly used tools to repair sleds is just some metal wire. Mushers will also carry an extra set of runner plastic in their sleds that goes on the bottom of the metal runners and helps the sled slide. I showed you earlier that mushers need to carry a 3-gallon cooker to make food for their dogs. What we'd like to do now is show you exactly how that is done and what the tools are that are used for that. Many of the checkpoints have water available for mushers to use, but in checkpoints that don't, or if you're stopped in between checkpoints or out on a training run, you might have to melt snow in order to create water for the dogs and for yourself to drink. We do this using this metal cooker apparatus. The cooker is fueled by methyl alcohol, or otherwise known as heat, which is something that some people put in their cars' gas tanks. We generally use 3 bottles of heat each time we stop to heat up water or melt snow to feed the dogs. You pour the heat into the bottom of this bigger bucket and then take some kind of wicking material. It can either be straw or a used dog booty, or in the case that we're going to show here, some fiberglass insulation, something that'll soak up the heat. And you put that in the bottom of the cooker, and then you strike a match and set the wick on fire. And once the wick starts, eventually the whole bottom of the cooker is aflame that is going to heat the water in the pot that we put on top of this. Once we've got the flame going, then we take the pot with the snow and set it on top of the flame. Go ahead and put the cover on and then wait for the snow to melt. It takes a lot of snow to make enough water to fill that pot, and it takes a while for the snow to melt, especially if it's really cold outside. At a checkpoint while the snow melts, mushers usually take that time to take a look at their dog's feet, massage any sore shoulders or wrists, and get the booties off the dogs, get straw down for the dogs. Then they can come back and check on how their snow is doing melting, and if need be they can add more snow to their cooker pot. While waiting for the snow to melt or the water to get hot, the other thing the musher will do is get the food ready to go with the water to feed to their dogs. We use a small cooler that's carried in the sled in order to mix up the hot water with the dog food. Some mushers use dry food, and some use meat, and some use a combination. Once the snow is melted and the water is hot, the musher will then add the hot water to the meat and or dry dog food that they have put into the cooler. And they might need to allow time for the meat to thaw, but otherwise, if it's just dry dog food, they might go ahead and give it right to their dogs. If the meat needs to thaw, we'll put the lid back onto the cooler and wait until the meat is thawed enough to feed to the dogs. In our sleds, we also carry bowls to feed the dogs in, and a metal scoop on a wooden handle that we use to ladle the food out of the cooler and put it into each dog's bowl. One other piece of gear that we carry with us when we go on runs is what we call a drop dog bag. On occasion when you're running, a dog will get hurt or sore or just be tired, and we can put them inside this bag and then strap the bag to the top of the sled so that the dog can take a little ride and recover. When leaving checkpoints, it's also useful to put straw in the bag if you're planning on camping somewhere before the next checkpoint. So the equipment is gathered, the sled is packed, the dogs are trained, and the team is ready to hit the trail, whether it be a small race across the mountains or whether it be a 1,000-mile journey to Nome. One thing is for sure, the dogs don't care where they're going. They're just anxious to hit the trail and do what they were born to do. Born to run. Thanks for tuning in again, and we wish you all a happy journey and best of fun following the Iditarod. Happy trails from Alaska.